Okay, welcome everyone. I am very excited for this interview today with an incredible person, incredible success story through working this program. Angelina, we just finished the program together. She's had amazing breakthroughs. It'll be really, really nice and inspiring to listen to this story. And it's all because she took the leap. She opened up and showed up week after week for herself. You put in the work. I want to thank you for being here today and doing this, Angelina.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy. Anytime we get a chance to talk, it's always a good time. So why don't you just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who is Angelina.
Sure. So, my name is Angelina, and I was born and raised in Texas. And I don't want to, you don't need the whole life story, but I'll just kind of hit the points that kind of defined my journey of health. I kind of grew up overweight. None of my family is healthy by any means. Just growing up in Texas, everything is bigger and better and more gravy and second helpings galore. And so I kind of grew up under that mentality, but with a lot of self consciousness, if you will. Getting into high school, that's probably when I first started developing eating disorders. Yeah, maybe even I would say right around eighth grade. In middle school, actually, other girls would throw away their lunch and I'd be like, what are you doing? And they would say, oh, you're going to eat your lunch. And kind of that started the spiral of feeling like I was eating too much or not eating enough or the right things or, and all this sort of stuff. So anywho, that went on a downhill journey pretty quickly. I started to develop anorexia because I was just under eating. I had Jordan, I didn't even tell you this, but anyway, we're getting in the weeds. Little Ziploc baggies of crackers. I would have like 4 saltines and like 4 vanilla wafers a day. And that would be like my food that I allowed myself. And then I would just over exercise and do all sorts of stuff to try to maintain my weight or to bring it down to what I felt like was like my peers. And unfortunately, that spiraled not only a horrible relationship with food and viewing food as evil in a sense, but also springboarding me into developing the opposite problem, which was compulsive overeating. So I think I kind of developed at an early age that my body just needed more food and was never satisfied until it felt overfull. And so that I struggled with that on and off for pretty much all of my life. I went on a journey to health, losing almost 60 pounds at one point when I moved to California. And a lot of that was just changing out what I was binging on instead of binging the, plates of fries and, chips and cookies. It was binging, lower calorie things, but I still never, ever got over or healed from the binging. And so I continued to struggle with that throughout my whole life. And I moved from Texas to San Diego, and that's where I lost the majority of my weight. Then I moved to LA, and I was just over exercising, in a sense, just 7 days a week, going all out, hours and hours and hours in the gym. Still never, I'm trying to mitigate the binging at that point. And so needless to say, it was a lot of emotional, I know this was just an intro, but we're going into it.
Yeah, why not? We're here for, yeah.
Going from California to Texas, where I grew up and where I was, considered obese, just by BMI standards. it triggered a lot of emotional turmoil in my mind because I didn't want to move back to home, quote unquote, but I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I did feel peace, and I was going for everything was right, except I still was carrying around this binging that I felt like I could never get over. And I never felt like anyone could relate. Like anytime I tried to ask for advice or help or counseling, they would say things like everybody overeats sometimes, or oh yeah, that's normal, or just quit. If you want to quit. And I'm like, I do want to quit, but somehow I can't. And so anyway, moving back to Texas, I gained a significant amount of weight because it was just harder to find those substitutes of the healthier alternatives to binging. And so I started binging higher calorie food, started gaining back some of that weight that I lost, and just spiraled back and forth, binging, not binging, binging, not binging, binging, not binging, never fully able to just get over that hurdle. And I came to a breaking point where I desperate. I mean, really, like I just was scouring the internet, scouring Instagram. I would follow all of these different people and then unfollow them because I felt like they gave me bad advice. And needless to say, throughout following a bunch of binging, quote unquote, dietitian or specialists, some good, some not so good. That's how I found Jordan. So he was kind of on that suggested for you, and called the unbinged solution. And I was like, that's what I need. I need the solution to unbinge myself. And so, I just started creeping through his posts. And first of all, he was a binge eater. Some of those dietitians were trained, but they had never actually struggled with binge eating. And so I felt like they couldn't relate on a real level because they hadn't actually gone through it. And so that was number one. He was a binge eater. And then number two, it seemed he got over binge eating and was able to heal from that part of his life. And he seemed to know what he was talking about. So I was like, okay, well, we'll see where this goes. And I think you reached out to me and invited me to join the Facebook group. And from there, you said, hey, would you be interested in one-on-one coaching? And I was like, please. So basically the large nutshell.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good arc of from the beginning until the point that we met. And I think that's a great summary, and unfortunately not uncommon, very unfortunate. Obviously everybody has a unique story, but young girl forced to look, and increasingly young guys, pressure to look a certain way and start changing their behavior often before they're even a teenager to suit an ideal that inevitably causes overeating for more people than it doesn't, binge eating. And then often people are enlisted in this cycle of undereat, overeat, vilify food, feel very afraid, very vulnerable. When we're very afraid and vulnerable, we're taking anything that's thrown at us. And that's when often garbage diets come people's way, and you really just get pulled further and further into it. Unfortunately, often from a very young age. To go back to the times when you were struggling, I guess, like the binge eating itself, how was it negatively impacting like your day-to-day life?
Oh man, where to begin? Gosh, I mean, it's so hard to think back. I mean, it was everything from wanting, like, either, at the point when I was younger, my parents, to my roommates, that I wanted them to be out of the house so then I could binge without judgment or without and just be like free in a sense to just binge, even though I hated doing it and I hated how I felt afterward. And I hated obviously the negative effects of my body. I mean, from it and just the health horrible aspect of it. I mean, this vicious cycle that I felt like no matter what I tried, no matter what I restricted or ate or didn't eat or completely ate, that nothing helped in a sense. Like if anything, a lot of like you talked about, horrible diets. I mean, I tried it all. I mean, everything from the snacks you order in the mail, to I mean everything, to cutting out, paleo. I mean, you name it, I did it. Like, I mean, because I thought, well, this will be the fix. Well, this will be the fix. If only I cut out this, and this, or if I substitute, then I'm going to break this cycle, and nothing ever worked. And I don't know how much we really want to go into it, but it really is a mental, thing. And the coaching that you provided, I mean, taught me that and applicable skills that I could do, to be able to have trigger foods that I never could have. I mean, in the house, everything from cookies to sweets. I mean, like I never could keep that stuff because it would lead to binging. And I would just be like, okay, when can I eat the entire bag? When can I eat the whole box? And I'd just like be waiting for the moment. And that was another reason why it got so bad when I moved to Texas, because for the first time since college, I didn't have any roommates, and I always had roommates. And so that kind of mitigated it to a sense where I would have to like sneak food in my room and like sneakily throw away wrappers and stuff like that, or eat in my car, or whatever, because it was all hidden. And I felt like anytime I tried to expose it, either there was a lot of judgment or it was just not understood. And so that's where I felt like you come in, where you were totally different from any other person I had really talked to, because you knew what I was going through, and you knew that there was light at the end of the tunnel and there is a way to overcome. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And that's I think essential for most people is to like, because it's such an isolating and really unique and alienating problem with a lot of shame and complexity to it. It's really important to work with somebody who's been there. My job is different from a therapist or from a dietitian. They perform therapy and they, give nutritional advice. But yeah, this problem is just so unique and painful to work with somebody who has been there and isn't anymore and can hold that light for you. Because I remember for years, you bring me down a not good memory lane, but that like waiting for people to be gone and knowing you don't like it, but really being hooked on the thrill, and then gravitating back into extremes because this gets so painful. I really can connect with that. And then, so I remember for so many years being certain it wasn't possible. I mean, certain, and anybody who said it was full of beans. So yeah. At the very least, to be with someone who says, no, it is, I am certain that it is, and hold that light for you, goes a long way. And that's an important part of what you're doing now, is like showing people like this is extraordinary for a lot of people who are stuck in that place, to see real person, real thing. It is possible that like, did you ever have that feeling when you were stuck, that pain of like, there's no way this will end?
Oh, definitely. Like, I mean, and I've told you this before, like I came to a place where I was like, Lord help me. Like, I know I can't I can't. I've done everything. And I can't do it by myself. It's obvious. Like I can't I can't do it by myself because I've tried to do it by myself for half of my life, and it's not working. And I mean, you were an answer to prayer. I mean, in all seriousness, like seriousness. Because I had never met anyone again who had been through it, come out on the other side and said, no, healing is possible, change is possible, and you don't have to suffer forever. I mean, because I came to a place, not even that long before I met you, that I thought, I'm just going to have to live like this forever. When I have a spouse, I'm just going to have to, eat in my car, before I go in the house. I'm just going to have to, and I just started to rationalize it in a really bizarre way, like that I was going to have to really live with this forever because I couldn't stop. And like you said, it is different. I had tried approaches to binge eating from other addictions that I had overcome in my past. And it's not the same because you need food to survive. You don't need pretty much anything else except for water and maybe sunshine. It's like anything else you could really live without. But food you need. And so I could never, I felt like, ever find that balance. And I really believe that would never be possible. So until you came along.
Yeah. And that's a really, really painful feeling. And to feel, I remember thinking that too, that I'll always just use varying levels of willpower to manage it. And, but just given that it's food and it's not alcohol or something you can just cut out, I was like, this will always suck, but maybe I'll just get better at fighting with it and better at like hiding and things like this. But and it's a beautiful thing to know that it is possible, and it really, really is. And it's a beautiful experience. So can you tell me a bit more about other things that you tried before this to stop?
Yeah. So obviously I tried the extreme restriction, with the anorexia. I even came to a point of, bulimia, and I cannot throw up. Like, even if I get the stomach virus, I like cannot throw up. But I did it because I felt like I had to, and I was eating so much at certain points where I was in physical pain by how full I was. And it's like I had to get it out because it was like debilitating. So obviously there's like those things, but then in the healthier sense, I tried eliminating certain foods. I tried eliminating sugar completely. I tried eliminating, dairy, gluten, all the bad foods. I tried being vegan. I tried being vegetarian. I tried like mail order snacks, that came where you basically like you eat like 6 times a day. And, some of those things temporarily worked. Like I lost weight, but it never healed me. It was a temporary Band-Aid fix. Like, oh, we're just substituting, a routine that you have. But then once you're off that routine or habit, then everything snowballs right back. And if anything, you double undid, or at least for me, like for instance, I was doing mail order snack, and you could substitute for anything. There's, Nutrisystem. There's like, there's all those things out there, and they're all the same thing. You mail in stuff and then you have your own, like, whatever you make. And I'm not gonna lie, I was like a big, like, this works, because it did work. It did. Yeah, I lost weight, but it didn't, like, I'm just being real. I was binging those little snacks. I would have to double up on some of my snack orders and sometimes lie about it and be like, oh yeah, I just like, like to have more on the go stuff. But in reality, that you get like, 5 snacks a day, and I was eating a box or two a day, but because they were so low calorie, I was still able to lose weight. But again, my actual habits and my brain had never changed. I'm still binging, and so it's like, yeah. And I thought that it was a huge fear of mine. I'm like, once I'm off this, because you transition once you reach your goal weight and back into real foods. And I was so scared. I was like, I'm going to gain it all back because I'm not going to have these little low calorie snacks as my binge food. And I did. And that's a hard truth. And I even tried to go back on those, diets and whatnot. And I mean, it's not sustainable and they're really not healthy. I mean, you look at the back of those things and they're just like Frankenfood. I mean, it's just like, there's a reason why they're so low calorie. They're all chemicals. They're not real food, And anyway, so I really tried it all, and I tried and I told you this, I had followed some, dietitians that specialized in binging or binge eating. And one thing that they said was, oh, you're only binging because you're restricting. If you open the floodgates and you have the Oreos and the Chips Ahoy and the whatever you feel like you can't control yourself, or you're eating the entire box or bag or whatever, if you have it in your house, you won't binge because it's because of this mentality of restriction. And so I was like, okay, maybe they're right. So I had those things in my house, and within the span of a week, I ate, okay, this is real. Okay, because I was like, all right, yeah, that is what it is. So I bought a box or package of Oreos because that was a huge thing for me. I loved Oreos, and I was like, so I bought a box of Oreos. I finished it within 2 days, and I was like, okay, well, that was just that box. It was because I'm new to this, so I'll buy another box. So I bought another box, and I finished that within 2 days. And I was like, okay, but now I'm done. So I bought another box, and I finished that one within a day. And I felt so sick. I literally almost went to the hospital because my bowels were just freaking whacked from all of the, Dutch processed cocoa and vegetable oil and all that hoopla that's in there. And, and I actually did go to this trial doctor thing. I didn't even tell you any of this, but anyway, we're in it. And I went to this trial doctor, that was supposed to, if you had severe constipation, all this sort of bowel problems. And, and I told them, which I never had that stuff before, but it was because I was binging so much and so horribly. And so it didn't work, all that to say. So, I mean, you name it, I tried it. And I literally came to a place where I was like, well, I've tried everything. I just have to live with this until I met you.
Yeah. And that's the whole spectrum, I guess, the extremes of the spectrum, which are the two messages that are out there today, unfortunately. And they work for some, but for most they don't. And those extremes are at one end, harsh restriction. And I went through that, and it's from a place of fear. Certain foods, hurt you, and you're going to be vulnerable to messaging that cutting them out is the answer, whether that's online or within yourself. And you'll start, well, I always say, when we're hurting, when we feel out of control, we'll grasp for anything that gives us a sense of control. And extremes give a sense of control. They're usually sowing the seeds for the next out of control period. And this is one of the hardest parts, but they give that. So we go through the gamut of, I've done keto, carnivore, vegan, vegetarian, planned meals, planned snacks, low calorie, low carb, high carb, fiber, all these kinds of things. And so the cutting out of things is at one end of the spectrum. You went through that gamut. And then the other is very popular online too, which is just total unbridled permission. is the answer. And anytime you tell yourself no, which in reality, in my philosophy at least, we have to do this sometimes. If everything was a green light for me, my inner 4-year-old would be running the show, and like it wouldn't be good. So that side of the spectrum, I think in many cases is equally as unhelpful, because it's neither realistic. And a big reason of this is because it's hard to have a more nuanced conversation online. We gravitate towards extremes when the topic is sensitive. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but you had to go through those gamuts. And I remember even coming in when you started, and this is something I try to do, is meet people where they're at and respect if they have, because I do believe in some food boundaries. I have boundaries and they're healthy. I keep an eye on them that they don't become restrictive, but I wanted to meet you where you were at, which was a quite like sterile food environment, and see, is that where you thrive? And how would you say, like, you coming in, as far as how you interact with more treat foods, how would you say that has changed to now?
Yeah, definitely. When we first met, I was extremely restrictive, like absolutely no sugar whatsoever. I mean, really, if it didn't grow out of the ground, like just straight up, then I was not going to eat it or consume it. And part of that was because I felt like, all of it was a downhill trigger, especially the sugar, and there is some truth to that. It's like it tastes good and feels good to eat, high fat and high sugar and high carbohydrates, but that's what they're really designed to do. But I felt like I couldn't control myself was the point. It wasn't that I couldn't, it was like I couldn't have it because I couldn't control myself. And I thought, well, if I never have it, then I would never run into that problem. And then I would still binge even other things, or I would still go to those things. I'm like, okay, I'm so clean, I'm so good, way to go, you. And then it was like the first chance I got, or I at a party, or some place where it wasn't this sterile, perfect, controlled environment that I created, then it was, well, this is the only thing here and I'm starving, or whatever. And then I couldn't have just one cookie, I'd have a whole bunch of cookies or the whole box of cookies. And like I work at a church, and so there's cookies literally I could literally walk out of my office right now and there would be, I can't even tell you how many boxes of cookies I could find in this place, and treats and snacks and candies and all that sort of stuff. And so, it would be like, okay, I would allow myself one cookie, but then I would go back and I get another cookie, and then I get 2 more cookies. I'm like, all right, I'm done after 2 cookies, and it was this constant thing. So yeah, I kind of went to that extreme because I thought, well, if I never have it to start with, then I never take the 1. So that doesn't spiral into the 12. But in that, you never, I don't want to say like you never have any fun, but like in a sense, it's like I always wondered about that, like if I were to ever, have a spouse and he wanted to go out for ice cream or have a cookie, would I always say no? And I didn't know, and so in that way it was very limiting. But now that I have found freedom from binging, like, I love I mean, I still eat pretty clean, just because I feel like it fuels me, to better, like I work out a lot and it better sustains me throughout my day and fuels my workouts and, just makes my body feel good. But I have treats for the first, like really for the first time in my life, that is in a healthy, balanced way. Like I have a coffee shop I love, and they have it's gluten free, but it's a gluten free blueberry muffin, and it has sugar in it. Don't get me wrong, And before I'd be like, no, it's got sugar in it. I cannot eat it,
Yeah.
And now I have the freedom that I can go and I can have that blueberry muffin and really enjoy it and not order three, which at one point I was doing, And so it's really freeing in a way. I mean, I feel like, I've never experienced this before in my life. I've never experienced this freedom for as long as I can remember. I mean, I've never been free. So thank you, Jordan.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a great journey. And it's not so long ago, but you came in, the hatches were battened down, and I thought, hey, maybe I always come with an open mind. Maybe this is where she thrives, but it's such a small population. I've been in a ton, dozens of Facebook groups, talked to hundreds of people, been through the gamut myself. It is a percent of a percent of a percent that thrive in total abstinence, because on paper, yeah, if not, it's like not having the one, that means I won't have the 12. Makes sense on paper. It's so complex, it's so multi-layered. And I know a small handful of people, maybe like, I don't know, 3 or 4, not even a full handful, who are happy within that lifestyle. But I can't even speak for them if they're happy or content, but who have years put together of that total abstinence, measure and weigh everything. And I respect them. It works for them, but I still wonder, like, the thing about the spouse that you talked about with kids at parties, it's a very, very invasive thing to try to have sterility in our relationship with food. And it was cool. Just as we went week by week, not even with pushing you on those things, but just with supporting with tools and mindset and non-food shifts, you started talking about more treats that you were having in very rich, abundant, beautiful, and sustainable, non-destructive ways. What allowed you to start reincorporating those foods and be okay with them?
I think part of it was I felt secure for the first time. Like I felt safe that I could have it without, pushing over that domino stack of binging and creating this monster. I mean, because you talk about the alligator all the time, and it really was, as I felt like, it was like, okay, I'm, Bruce Wayne in normal life, and then I turned into the Hulk,
Yeah.
with the binging, and that, because it was like, you couldn't reason with the Hulk, you couldn't talk to the Hulk like a normal person, you couldn't have a conversation with the Hulk, and it's like that was me, when I was in that binge mentality. It was like it didn't matter what I said. It didn't matter what I said or who I was around or whatever. It was like I would have done whatever it took to get what I wanted, And so I think with me and the treats, it was for the first time I felt like I knew my triggers, and not triggers in the sense of like the things of food, but to get me to that place of turning into the Hulk, like like Bruce Wayne knows that he can't get angry, to a certain level, or else he, turns into the Hulk. And for me, you taught me so much in regards to like really applicable skills to manage my hunger throughout the day, because I really found that like, like there was something like, incorporating that extra meal. That was something that was like way in the beginning of yours and my
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And I was like, I was scared, because it's like you're constantly brainwashed, or at least as a woman, it's like you eat more, you will definitely gain weight. And it's like, yeah, but this binging thing, it's
Yeah.
like eating an extra meal, eating an entire box of cookies, it's like,
Yeah.
And so just incorporating that small thing, not only did I feel more sustained throughout the day and happier and fueled, for my like workouts and just my activities and day. But I felt like I was constantly me, the Bruce Bain, Bruce Banner, just like I was just always myself. Like I could reason with myself, and that's where I felt the liberty and the freedom to be able to have that treat, is as long as I was always me, and as long as me, the conscious me, never left and the primal brain, took over, because that's when it gets really scary and really hairy really quickly. And so that's really how, once I felt like I had that step, I felt like I had more freedom to be able to venture into the forbidden foods I had once considered.
Yeah, I am definitely going to use that. I use the crocodile a lot. I'm going to use that Bruce Bain metaphor too. That's beautifully put. Yeah, and that's what we believe in is, like the number one tool that people deploy to get through this problem is willpower. And it's just so overused and so ineffective. And so we believe in, like, I believe strongly in the program practice, zooming out and looking at, like, if we identify for you personally, Angelina, what behaviors, routines, and experiences are contributing to a pileup of hunger, and we address them in a preventative way, then it's not about getting better at fighting the urges when they come up. It's about making them not come up, right? It's giving you a better chance. So like you said, like, I can get hungry, maybe I can get a little bit upset, I can have challenges, but I don't cross the line to where evolution takes over, primal brain takes over, you flip the switch, you're the Hulk, and no human being there. We have evolved to not have control there, because it's like, get out of the way, you're killing us, and instinct takes over. And the sad thing is that in that moment, so many people start to loathe themselves for not being able to override evolutionary characteristics that are one of the strongest reasons that we're alive as a species, right? So that's a shame. People shouldn't feel like they have to control that. And that's where people think that the lack is the ability to white knuckle harder. And this is the benefit of having a second set of eyes with experience and, like, I believe so much more in strategy than willpower. 99% strategy. Sure, we deploy some willpower sometimes. But for you, yeah, it was like part of your formula for success, not letting hunger get away from you. Eating a lot of protein throughout the day, having that extra meal was a huge game changer. The enjoying treats in non-triggering environments, having, like, you went out, had that beer that one time, maybe like going for a cigar, like learning to treat ourselves in non-triggering ways, we start to see, oh, it's possible. I remember when you had a muffin and you were like, I didn't go back. It was a huge experience, to see that it's possible. And then you start to see, okay, I can have this, like, you have this amazing sounding, like, brownie bark that you have in your house. And that just takes having some experiences where you trust yourself, and it grows with time. So what would you say is the best part about having this now, where you're flexible and you're free and you're not in that cycle of fear?
Golly, hard to say. It's like, what is not the best? Well, like, even and it's just so, oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, it's changed me as a person. Like, I even, and like, went through a season of depression, for almost a month. And in those times in my past, when I've gone through really low emotional states, I would use food as a coping mechanism. And not that, you can never have an ice cream or whatever when you feel sad. No, but it's one thing to have ice cream. It's another thing to have a carton. It's another thing to have a cookie. It's another thing to have a whole box, because once you start hurting and harming yourself, that's no longer a treat, it's harm, you're hurting you. And then you feel this remorse and the shame, and it's just this cycle. And I was able to experience this, blue state without having all of this other stuff. I was able to just be me and work through my emotions without having all of the extra added weight that I usually would put on. Like I was able to just be like, okay, we're going to get through this. We're going to figure out, and we're going to come out on the other side. But before, like the last time I went through this state, which was before I met you, I'm just going to be real. It must have been, I don't know how, there were bags of candy. So it must have been around Halloween. But anyway, and I would get a whole bag of the mini candy that was like, this big of a bag. And I just eat one after another, after another, after another. And then go back. And then I would leave the ones that I didn't like, and I wouldn't eat those. It was like some sort of, line in the sand. And then I'd eventually eat those too. And it's like, so even this small, I mean, it's not really that small, but like, I'm able to experience the highs and lows of life without food having to be part of that low, that it's kind of a separate thing. And the other thing is, like, even when like the Hulk, I can recognize when the Hulk, my primal brain starts to awaken, if you will, like, and I feel like it's a total skill that takes a little bit of time and definitely takes a ton of strategy, to be able to like keep it at bay until you're able to really, feed yourself, not it, but and then that makes it go back to sleep and be like, okay, all is good with the world. And that was something that totally changed, because there are going to be moments that you are going to be hungry, and there was, and moments that you're not going to have access to your perfectly planned protein meals. And I never knew how to deal with that before. It was like, if I didn't have my perfectly planned meals or snacks, previously when I was on part of those diets or what have you, it would turn into this horrible beast that I would have to deal with the repercussions over and over and over again. And it was just this constant loop and cycle. And to be free of the cycle, I almost can't even put into words like how it's changed me for the better, because it's no longer a part of my life. And I finally feel like I have been able, like what I've been wishing since, baby Angelina, in a sense, has always been wishing that I could turn the page. And I finally have. And so, yeah. I'm like, if only she could see me now.
Yeah. And that's very beautifully put. And one of the first things you said there, you're like, I don't know what is, because it makes me a different person. And then I appreciate you sharing the recent, difficult time that you went through. And it's just light years away from going through that and like self-harming through food during the whole thing. So, because then it's like you have whatever life threw your way, and then this self-loathing of not being able to handle these things. And even as difficult as that was, you were never pouring gasoline on the fire actively. You moved through it in a healthy way, in an honest way, and you did move through it, and it ended. And maybe it would have lasted longer, maybe it could have got worse, but yeah, you were able to do that, and that's really a special experience. And then you talked about, like, real life happens. We don't always have these things planned. You start to get like the like Hulk is coming thing. But when you're equipped with awareness of what's happening in your own brain, you can like I always say, that's what I sent out an email a few weeks ago. Like, I live with a huge alligator in a tiny apartment. And it's not up to me to be like, back in your cage, I die, but to gently manage these things. So then when you're aware, like, oh, this is my Hulk side, this is my primal side, and it's coming, and you're like, hey, buddy, you know, we're gonna get food together in this way, instead of being like, pull the binge identity alarm. This is where I do XYZ. And it's not because that's where you do XYZ. It's because that's where you're vulnerable enough, you lack understanding, and so you fall into that pattern. But it's not at all what we're built to do. And so I wanted to ask you about the time when you were house sitting, just because this was like a real revelation of a moment. Can you just share that kind of moment?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I regularly dog sit / house sit for a couple at my church, and they have all of my trigger foods. And I was very like, okay, we're not going to even keep this stuff in the house, no sugar, no salt, or whatever, whatever my lines were. And there were a lot, so I can't even get into how many, but they had everything. And also a big one for me was nut butter. I felt like if I had a spoonful in a smoothie or whatever, I would just go back and get another one and get another one. And I'm like, ooh, but maybe one more. And then it's like, before I know it, I've eaten half of the container. And nut butter is super high in both fat and carbs and oils and everything. And so, that was just like, no, I felt like that. And anywho, so I didn't keep any of that stuff in my house, and keep, chips, cookies, the nut butter. And this couple so sweet. And they would say, whatever you find in the pantry or the fridge, free game. And I'm like, okay, but I'm not going to do it. And so the first time I house it, I think I had like a little bit. And the next time, I had a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, until I had to start buying things to replace the things that I was eating. And I kept on thinking, like, oh God, what if they have cameras, and see me like binging all their food, like a freaking crazy person that's never eaten in their life, because that's how I was, and that's what I was doing. And on one hand, it was like I was grateful for the opportunity to earn a little extra money, but on the other hand, I kind of dreaded it, because I was like, every time I go there, maybe I'm a little bored or whatever, but I'm always binging, and I can't break this cycle. It's like I can't go there and not binge. And no matter how hard I was like white knuckling, like I'm going to bring all my food and do this and do it, and none of it worked. And I just still go back to, raiding the cabinet or raiding the fridge or whatever. And I was at a breaking point. I'm like, well, this is a part of my life. Every time I go and I dog sit, I'm going to binge. And I just kind of accepted that. And I even would try to like really restrict my calories and white knuckle it, before going. So that way, when I do binge, because I'm going to anyway, at least I won't be like, out of control in the caloric intake or whatever. You rationalize hoopla things that don't even actually make sense. Digress. So I was there in the middle of you coaching me, and we had already been, one-on-one doing coaching sessions for a few weeks. And I just came to this realization, because I had accepted being a binge eater as a part of my identity, and that's why I say it's hard to begin where this has changed my life, because it was a part of me and for so long, like, I don't know, like, those like barnacles on a ship, and they're just like, up. It's just a part of it, it's like, it was like
The
that.
ship
Like,
now.
yeah, it was part of me,
Yeah.
it was a part of my identity. And anywho, there was one morning, and I don't know if we had a call like the night before or what it was, but it was in the morning, and I was just drinking my coffee, and I'm looking out at this. They have a beautiful view, and I was looking out at this vista, like sipping my coffee, and I was just like, I don't think I have to be a binge eater anymore. Like, I don't think I have to be a binge eater. Like, I don't think I have to be a binge eater anymore. And I never accepted that would never be who I was, Angelina, this, that, and the other. And she's also a binge eater, and I never had that like real, like as if something I wanted, desperately wanted, prayed for even, but never felt confident that would be reality. And that was the first time that it set in that I don't have to be a binge eater anymore. At this point, it's a choice because I have all of the tools I need, to let it go. And so, yeah, that was the time, yeah, that I was dog sitting, and it was just, I mean, I think snowballing from that moment ever since, once that reality set in that freedom was really possible, it was just like, running towards it, from that point on, with then being able to have the freedom to incorporate, treats and things I had always considered forbidden, to being able to, enjoy, like, people make cookies and cakes and they're like, have a piece of, try my cake or whatever. And I would always say no. I'm like, thank you so much. You're so sweet. I mean, I had people make food for me. Like, they're like, oh, I made this for you for your birthday. And I'd be like, thank you so much. And I throw it away because I'm like, I'm not going to eat this. This is no. I know there's got to be sugar in here. And it's like to have the freedom to be able to, one, eat it or not eat it and not have to sit there and eat it all in one sitting. I can have a piece of the cake. It's like you can have your cake and eat it too, like the saying, like for real though. You can actually have the cake and eat it and not be a binge eater. Like that was never ever not correlated. Yeah, until that realization, I was like, wow, it is possible. So yeah.
Yeah, beautifully put. And that was your turning point, and it has snowballed from there. And when you're stuck in the cycle, it is a snowball too. And we feel like all it'll ever do is get worse. But I always like to say, like, we're momentous creatures. Like human being, we catch a spark and we go for it. So if you're rolling down a bad hill that's fueled by fear and hopelessness, it's going to get perpetually worse until you have a shift and you go, like you talked there about hope and confidence. And so if you're stuck in a cycle that's perpetuated by hopelessness and fear, and then you get a spark, like in that moment, we had made some shifts that led up to this moment where you were like, I am confident enough to release this identity in this moment because I have hope. And then, so it's like right there, that snowball went back up to the top of the mountain and it went down the beautiful side. And all that energy that was working against you, all of a sudden it's like, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And then you start to continuously explore new things that you're able to do. And yeah, just ride this new momentum and use all your potential in a positive way. And you haven't looked back. You've grown in a lot of ways to where you have those foods, some of those foods in your house and are totally okay with them. And so that's a beautiful light for people who are stuck in that hopelessness and fear, that they could just be a few steps, a few puzzle pieces away from going just as fast in the opposite direction. The last question I wanted to ask you is, there are a lot of people in that vulnerable place, and there can be a lot of doubt or skepticism, in taking the leap. Like you took a leap of faith. You got to a desperate enough point. You took a leap of faith, and now you are enjoying the benefits of that. Like you get to live your life now in flexibility, out of that cycle. But sometimes people need just a message from the person on the other side to help them take that leap of faith. Like, what would you say to your former self, or to somebody who's like, I want it, but maybe it won't work for me, or maybe it's XYZ? What would you say to that person?
I would say that freedom is possible. Uh, it that it doesn't have to be who you are. Change is possible, and it's actually not as hard as you think. So I feel like everything I had ever done before was extremely hard. And not that it's easy, it definitely takes work, but it's not like, you know, a lobotomy, or you're going to these like counseling sessions for hours and hours on end. It's nothing like that. It's a lot simpler than you'd imagine it to be. At least if I were to talk to former me, who before I met you, I would have thought, that it would be, first, I didn't think that change was possible. I thought I was going to have to live with it forever. Not true. Second, I thought that that it was a part of my identity and it's who I would always be. Not true. And I thought if I were to change, or if change were to be possible, it would be, like an extreme amount of money and years on end, and take, me sitting on a couch and say like, okay, well, tell me about your childhood, and it's, or repressed, stuff that maybe I never dealt with. I mean, I really thought it could be anything. And yet it wasn't nearly as hard as I thought, like that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, it took weeks, essentially, compared to years and years and years where I had been dealing with this and trying everything for years and years and years. And, honestly, my only regret is I wish I met you sooner, because like, I mean, shoot fire. I mean, like, just incredible. I wish this message was like to everyone, at OA meetings and the whole 9 yards, and be like, it really is possible, and you don't have to struggle with this all your life.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I like the certainty that you spoke that with. It is possible. Believe it's possible. That's like one of the most important first steps, maybe the most important first step. And then talking about, like, we do think that, like, I thought sometimes there's just a part of my brain I got to get taken out, or I gotta go all the way back to the first piece of sugar that I had and see why was I traumatized. And like, we don't have to solve all our problems. It's kind of interesting. I had done a chat just before this with another girl, and she was like, it's very like common sense approach. And that's how we try to approach it. Like, you're never going to solve all your problems. You solved the binge eating, you're food free. And then like a big wave of depression hits you. Like, life is going to keep coming at you. It's going to keep coming at you. It's going to hurt. So we don't have to get to the root of it. We don't have to unwind your mind and heal you. We just have to, in a common sense way, look at you as a person with certain behaviors and go, where do we fill the gaps to where Angelina doesn't need to do this anymore? And it's like, when you get good at it and you approach it in this way, there's just a person with a cycle of behaviors. It's like, let's change this, and then believe in you. And then you're like, hey, I feel different. And then it's like, you can enjoy your life now. It's very much simpler. I like how you highlighted the simplicity in your answer there.
Yeah. I mean, truly, I really thought it was going to be like extremely complicated. And you're right. I mean, life is going to continue to bring you, I mean, life is hard, like it really is. And I'm grateful in a sense that I went through that season and that valley, if you will. But again, I didn't have to tow along this horrible self-destructing behavior along with all of this other stuff that I'm dealing with. I'm able to just separate the two, from the physical and the emotional sense of it, because I never could. It was like, oh, if I'm depressed, then I'm going to do XYZ, whatever that may be. And for me, it was usually just binging on like the whatever sugary thing I could find. And I kept thinking the problem is the sugar. The problem is, that I want that release of dopamine and this constant cycle. And it was much more simple than that. It really was much more simple than just wanting the sugar because of the emotion. No, the problem was that I'm associating the emotion with this habit. So as long as I fix this habit, the emotion can still have its way to deal, and I can focus on that, but not have to deal with all of this horrible stuff, that comes with the binging, So I think that was another thing that was very eye-opening, was to realize that it's a total separate thing, like me as a person and whatever, emotional things I deal with, whether childhood trauma or, just rejection or fear or, whatever the negative things that you deal with in life, the binging is not actually a part of that. Like, because I thought, again, starting binging so young, that it was like some repressed thing that I had, because like my mom didn't let us have like certain treat things, or we could only have X amount of candy a day or like whatever. And I thought it was like related to that in some way. And it wasn't related to any of my childhood trauma or any of my like fear of rejection or anything like that. That stuff's still there. But at least I can work on that
Yeah.
stuff in its own space without like destroying my body. You know what I mean? Like the mental and the physical, I always thought were, and they are interconnected in a way. I mean, you and I, that very first talk that we had, it was like, spiritual, emotional, and physical, they are interconnected, and but they are three separate things too. And so that's probably my biggest takeaway, actually. Now that I'm saying this out loud, is like they are interconnected and they feed off of one another, but you can really take care of this physical problem in a very simple mental way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They can be compartmentalized, and you can, we can just address this problem without having to solve all our other problems. And that's actually when it gets really messy, is when it like life starts to get put through like the vein of my food problem. So it's like life gets bad, food gets bad, food gets bad, life gets bad, and they're really intermingled. And then people start to feel, like everything's attached to this. And it can be isolated, it can be surgically addressed, and then we can just have problems like normal people. So I think your story is remarkable. I think you're an inspiring person overall. And I think, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to shine your light. I know you're always shining your light, but to do it in a unique way today for people who need this, and so they don't have to struggle as long as you did and as long as I did, and we can save them time and life. So is there anything else from you, anything else you want to share before we finish?
Change is possible. Change is possible.
I love it, and you're living proof.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You're the best, Jordan.
Yeah, we make a good team. So thanks again. Keep shining your light, and I appreciate you always.
Thank you. Appreciate you.